least shear your sheep when they're dry and present your wool, dry, and take the dags off. That's a massive plus already. We would see a lot of farmers that'll hold on to their wool for, a couple of years and it goes off, but they still think it's worth the same as what the new season stuff's going to be. So you're getting an awful mix of stuff coming in, so you're better getting your wool in, or wherever you're taking it to that season and getting it in fresh, because I say your wool's like spuds. You want to get it harvested and get it in fresh or it's going to go off.
Hello, I'm Kieran Lynch and welcome to OviCast, the Teagasc Sheep podcast. Each episode will bring you latest insights, advice and technical updates for the sheep industry. With the shearing season well underway, I'm delighted to be joined in this week's episode by Jayne Harkness-Bones, Depot Manager with Ulster Wool. We discuss the factors that influence the quality of wool, some of the challenges in the marketplace in recent years, and what happens wool from purchase till it reaches the market. We talk about shearing, wool handling and storage, with Jayne highlighting some simple practices that can make the process easier and improve the quality of wool we harvest. In the latter half of the podcast, Jayne, who's also a council member of the Irish Growing Wool Council, discusses some of the work they've been involved in to realise the potential of wool, develop further opportunities and provide support to the industry. We hear first from Jayne.
It takes a sheep 12 months to grow a fleece. Now, I know there's some breeds you'll shear them twice a year, but if you're talking in general figures here, so they're growing this for free basically, and it can take us just a few seconds to destroy the potential of what that wool's worth at the time of shearing. That coupled with all the different types of wool that there is, and also in Ireland we're really good at crossbreeding things, so you have a whole other matrix and monopoly of contributing factors there as to what your wool is going to be like after it's been shorn.
Look, you touched on it there. Not all wool is the same. There's a bit of variation out there between the type of fleece you get and its potential value.
Yeah, we would classify the wool here where I work into 6 different categories, but we handle over 100 different grades of wool. And they're all based on the length of the staple, the colour of the staple, and the strength of the staple. So when you think of it, like I'll get farmers that'll maybe ring up and complain about, I've been scenting, I've had the same sheep now, I've had a closed flock for 5 years, and why is my wool not worth as much as it was when I first started scenting it in? And I'm like, well, if you've hog wool, that's the prime of her wool that she's going to grow for you. It's the best wool you'll get from that sheep. And then obviously the older they get, that staple strength gets weaker over time, and you're expecting an older ewe to still produce you with good wool. It's the same with your lambs. You can't expect an older ewe to keep producing the goods for the full duration of her life cycle with you. So those are just a few factors to think about.
And then, of course, as you touched on there, you have the breed factors, you have crossbreeds in it, you have different types of wool.
And we are champion at crossbreeding in Ireland. We'll crossbreed. And I don't want to get into a discussion about different breeds, because I've been stung with that before, using examples of breeds, and then someone's on the phone to complain to me that I was slagging off their breed when I was just making a point. But yeah, whenever you'll see it happen, there'll be like a stylish breed will come in for a few years, and then everybody wants to buy the rams for them, or the tups or the tips or whatever you call them in your part of the world, and there may be black or grey fibres in the ram that's then coming through into replacement stock that's full of grey fibres. And I've been told from where I work and the manufacturers, they want either the whitest of whitest wool or the blackest of blackest wool. They don't want grey fibres. It's harder to dye, and it's harder to for the dye to take for the colours that they want, because obviously if you have a blank canvas, you can dye it whatever colour you want, or if it's naturally coloured and it's naturally beautifully black, then that's great. You don't need to dye it because it's already got the colour there.
I might come back to some aspects of that after, because that has an impact on what we can do at the time of shearing as well. Look, it's been challenging on the wool market for the last couple of years, and I suppose listeners to this will say, well, look, we're getting a low value for the product, and we're going to talk now about how we can improve that. But maybe can you put a little bit of context around that? What has happened over the last couple of years in terms of sales of wool and some of the challenges you're facing at the moment?
When I started working here in, I think it was 2016, 2017, the price of wool was good. And then we had all this, the B word, it's okay to say it, all the Brexit scaremongering started, and you could just gradually see, a wee bit was shaving off each year until we hit the COVID. When COVID hit, the price literally just fell off the edge of a cliff. And the reason being, most of our wool will end up in carpets into the hospitality sector. So that's your hotels, your cruise ships, restaurants and things that would have woolen carpets on their premises. They closed up overnight, and whenever they did start to reopen, 2 years later, they weren't refurbishing with carpets. They were building beer gardens and outdoor dining facilities. So that was, one of the biggest factors as to why the price of wool dropped so quickly. Also, all the processing plants, the scouring facilities, all the manufacturers further down the line closed. They had to get their social distancing. All those things all had an impact. Then once we got through COVID, things started to improve, and you could see the price was starting to get back up. Now, it wasn't where it needed to be, but it was improving. And then all of a sudden we had the energy crisis, and you know yourself, your electricity bill at home just went through the roof, and it was the same for not just the scouring of the wool, but everything thereafter. Every part of the chain had those increases. So when it comes right back to the primary producer, which is us or the sheep farmers, that's what was taking the hit, because they just didn't want to pay for it because it was costing so much at the other end to get it processed.
Look, you see both sides of it. You're farming,
hard, yeah.
You're working in the industry. In terms of the product that comes in here, so the type of fleece you get in, how big a bearing has that? How clean it is? How well presented it is? How big a bearing has that on your ability to sell it?
Well, it depends on what grade it is. But if we take time to try and at least shear your sheep when they're dry and present your wool, dry, and take the dags off, that's a massive plus already. We would see a lot of farmers that will hold on to their wool for, a couple of years, and it goes off, but they still think it's worth the same as what the new season stuff's going to be. So you're getting an awful mix of stuff coming in. So you're better getting your wool in, or wherever you're taking it to that season, and getting it in fresh. Because I say your wool's like spuds. You want to get it harvested and get it in fresh, or it's going to go off. And that would be something that we would see as being very difficult, because then you're left with all this damaged wool, essentially, that's damaged because it's either been shorn wet, or it's been, it's been sitting for a couple of years. If you've got good white wool that is dry and not full of grey fibres, you're going to, have more of a chance of it getting into a better grade, which will return more revenue.
I suppose at the end of the day, the more that you sell, the better grade, the better market, the more demand there is for wool that's being produced.
Yeah, and the really ironic thing is, you see the damaged wool that I mentioned there, most of that is what ends up in insulation. And if I had a pound for every time somebody says, why is wool not in insulation? I'm like, well, it is, but it's the damaged and the low value stuff that goes into it. The reason it costs so much is the point I made earlier, is that the processing cost to get it made into insulation is colossal.
Look, we mentioned quality, but maybe it's no harm just to qualify what we're talking about here. In terms of getting an ideal fleece into the depot, Jayne, what is an ideal fleece for you when it's coming in?
It's dry, it's rolled, and there's no dags on it.
I know coloured wool in it either. Well,
yeah, any black fleeces or coloured fleeces kept separate. You shear them last, and that makes that an easy process. So you're keeping them separate. Now, I know some places will say, can you keep your hog wool separate than your ewe wool? Now, I know that's not realistic at the time of shearing. So
that's the ideal of what you want to see coming in. I'm sure you're getting more problematic fleeces in. What are they presented like?
Whenever everything's just dumped into a bag, dags and all, it all congeals together because the lanolin or the wool grease sticks together. So if you're expecting a merchant or a grader or someone to sort that out, they're lifting handfuls of wool to grade rather than the whole fleece. So if you have a really good fleece in there and it's all getting mixed in with all the other stuff, you're only going to get handfuls of the good stuff rather than that whole 2 to 3 kilos of that fleece going into that top grade. You're only going to get a handful of it. Whereas if you've all, and I say rolled up nicely, I'll say if you've ever lifted a towel off the bathroom floor and rolled it in a ball to shove it in the wash basket, if that's all you can do at the time of shearing, that is, spot on. And obviously no dags, but sure, you'll have them crushed before you're shearing anyway, so you'll be all right.
And look, no harm, maybe let's just talk about that. In terms of the prep before shearing, on the shearing day itself, what are the kind of top tips we can do to actually improve that process? And I'm conscious here, like it's a busy day on farm as well, so some of this will leave it easier on all involved.
Yeah, and I totally appreciate not all of us will have help at the time of shearing. Sometimes you might have too much help, which I know might sound a bit of a contradiction, but sometimes if you have loads of people there that are in the road and not, functioning how you need them, also if there's small kids about, it's a dangerous time as well. So there's all those things to keep in mind. But the most obvious thing is that your sheep are dry before shearing. If you can, house them on slats or a straw bed that's been, packed down and accumulated over the winter. Don't put any fresh straw in there or shavings, because it's almost impossible to pick all that back out again at the time of shearing. Draft off the lambs, and keep them like above them, if that makes any sense. So as your flow will be better whilst they're in. And don't be overcomplicating the day with wanting to do feet or dosing or doing other tasks, because it's a hard enough day. You don't want to be adding any more to it. Plan that for another time. If you can make sure their bellies is empty a good 4 hours before, not only does this reduce the soiling of the wool or staining with the dung, but it's much more comfortable for the sheep. She's going to sit better to be shorn. You should have them dagged before. Now, at home, what we do, we have those wee electric hand shears, the wee ones you just charge them up and away you go. And if somebody comes into the yard, if we're doing their feet or if we're dosing them or vaccinating the lambs or whatever, if somebody's really dungy, just two seconds and you just take it off and it's done. I appreciate not everyone will have that or those options, but that's what we do at home. In the holding pens, before they're going up to the shearing pen, don't be putting straw in there. Don't be putting shavings in there. And one of the most easiest things you can do at the time of shearing to completely maximise your clip is to shear your coloured sheep last. Keep them back, hold them back, shear them last, and keep their wool separate. As soon as a coloured fleece comes in contact with a non-coloured fleece, all those tiny fibres stick together and there's no way you'll ever get them off again, and that good white fleece will become a grey grade because it's been contaminated with the black fibre.
Even with best intentions, it can be hard to pack them separately, especially if there's a couple of people there.
Yep, I get it. It's really hard, and it's hard to think of everything at the time. If you've a 3-stand shearing trailer and there's 3 boys shearing flat out and there's lambs, flying everywhere because they've broke out to get back to the ewes, and yeah, I get it. It's a busy, frantic time. But if at all possible, try and keep your coloured sheep to the end and keep it separate.
So look, Jayne, if we can get ewes in, we have everything done right beforehand. What about when we get the fleece sheared off cleanly? What about what we do with the fleece afterwards? Like, how important is rolling it? How important is if there is any tags or that left on it? What do we need to do with the fleece once it's shorn?
If the shearing trailer is on a raised board, great, just roll the fleeces on that. Or if it's one of the wee pens, that they build it up and you're having to use the ground for the fleeces, make sure it's clean. Put down a tarp or something else, an old an old banner or an old just something to cover the ground. You might be in a field. I appreciate if you're watching me doing it, I probably make it look really easy, same as shearing. You think, oh, that doesn't look too bad, I could do that myself. When it comes to the wool, it isn't too bad, but the key things are if there's any tags, just take them off. The belly wool goes back into the fleece and you roll it from the rear to the neck with the cut side out for all breeds apart from blackface. Blackface gets rolled the other way where you have the outside out. I've asked why and they're like, oh, it's just the way it's always been. It's to identify those breeds when they come to wherever they're going. Sometimes I would have, say for example, some of my mules at home, if I'm rolling them up, and mules obviously come from the blackface and the blueface. So if there's a black collar on it or there's a black tail on that fleece, I'm taking that off because it's black wool. I'm taking that out of that fleece, so I'm just left with the white wool. But you don't have to get that technical. And as I said earlier, if you've lifted the towel off the bathroom floor, just roll it in a ball and get it in the bag. Don't be doing these big bands and twisting and going lapping it round. That's just unnecessary. You don't need to do that.
So just keep it simple. Make an effort to roll the fleece. If there is coloured stuff there, pack it separately in a small meal bag or that in it, or a separate pack. Look, the packs itself, I suppose ideally we should be using wool packs. Probably 99% of them will be meal bags of that. Labelling that, Jane, or is there a difference in the pack you're getting in?
Yeah, well, I think it's important to get wool packs off your merchant or whoever you're taking it from, because if you're using, I know tote bags and meal bags are great, but they will or may have been sitting for a while, or they've been cut open. So those nylon fibers will end up getting mixed in with the wool. Um, so that's not good. You don't want that. Also, it's hard not to use coloured baler twine and stuff as well. If you can use pegs or some sort of, hooks to close the bag rather than baler twine, because again, that gets mixed in with the wool. If you are taking your wool to a merchant who's part of a scheme or is using the wool for a specific thing, it's important to have your contact details on there so as they can make sure that any of the premiums are going back to you, so as they have your contact details. There's no point in just sending it in without it.
Shearing's over. We've done that bit of it. Talk to me a little bit about storage. I suppose, ideally, Jane, you'd be getting away as quick as you can, but if you are storing it, what impact can that have on the fleece?
One of the main things I'll hear is, but it's in my dry shed. And I'll be like, but it'll still be damaged. If it's been sitting on a concrete floor, leaning against a concrete wall, wool is a naturally absorbent fibre, so it's going to suck the moisture through the concrete into the wool, and then it becomes damaged. If you don't have time to get your wool off your farm as quickly as you can, if it's going to be like an autumn thing before you're maybe cleaning out sheds to bring cattle in or whatever, store them on pallets, keep them off the ground, and make sure they're stitched up and closed up for a couple of reasons. One, you don't want the wool all to fall out, but I've heard stories of cats having kittens in them and various other rodents and things nesting in your wool. You don't want that. And keep it covered, so you don't want bright light shining in on it. Because if you forget about it for a year, it's just going to go off. Your good white wool will turn yellow, and it's called naturally discoloured, is what the grade would be, which means it's not as white as it could have been.
I think a lot of producers over the last couple of years have kept wool from year to year, maybe hoping a better price. Will have seen that.
It'll just be a bag of dust, it's just going to disintegrate. It's a natural living, breathing fibre, and the only way that wool will keep is if it's been processed after it's been shorn.
Talk to me a little bit about the processing. Look, we all know what goes for process, but maybe just explain to us what happens. Take us through the scouring process.
So whenever where I work, when the wool leaves here, it goes to one of two scouring plants, and the two biggest scouring plants that are left in Western Europe are both based in Bradford, and it's basically a washing plant. There's these big baths that it goes in and out and in and out. I think it's like 7 times that happens. Then it goes through a whole drying process, and then it gets baled up again. Then it gets combed, then it gets carded, then it, if that's what the manufacturer wants, it might just be washed and dried, and then it goes on after that. But before it then gets made into anything else, it needs to be combed and carded and dyed, and then spun into whatever it is, or woven into something, and then made into whatever the product is. So there's a lot of hands touch it before it ends up in a shelf somewhere, And
obviously, the sooner that process happens, the better the quality wool going through it.
Yeah, and you'll find as well that the better quality wool, there's less of it, or it feels like there's getting less of it. Like your Lusters, your Blueface Leicesters, your Teeswaters, your Wensleydales. There's such a small percentage of the clip fits into that, and that's what makes the good money. And so, the more you can get of that, it will be a good overall. But
just like you touched on the money, but the auction process, how does that work?
Well, here it's slightly different than a merchant, whereas a merchant will have buyers, I think. But here, where I work, there's 20 auctions over the year, so it's sold in a controlled way. Each auction has roughly 1 million kilos in it that's sold on behalf of the farmers that send their wool here. So we don't actually ever own it or buy it off the farmers, so to speak. We just grade it, pack it, sell it, market it, and do everything we can to maximise the returns for what those grades are. But as I said, there's over 100 different grades. You need 8.5 ton for one lot. Like, there's a lot of wool. Yourself, like, we had 140 ewes clipped there, and I think there's 4 bales of wool. Like, that's going to be the best part of the wee cattle trailer, getting it filled to get it in, and that's just me and my one little farm. You think if there's 15 million kilos of wool on the island of Ireland, that's a lot of wool, a lot of wool. And it's not all the same. Every fleece is different, and that's why we need to streamline the ones and group them together so as it's a commercially sellable lot, and that's what we do.
So if we kind of go back to where we started with this, the higher volume of better quality fleeces we put in, the easier the sale is on it, I imagine, the bigger the market you have for it.
Well, the more it should, in theory, generate as a return, in theory.
Now, I'd be devil's advocate. Most listeners will say, look, us on the ground, where we're going to get it. But I suppose it's the chicken and egg unless we try something in it.
Yeah. And, I'm maybe jumping the gun a bit as well, but I'm not saying that all farmers we have a responsibility to ask people, when's the last time you bought something made from wool? But really, like, is that okay to ask people? When's the last time you got a wee rug for the front of the fire? Or when's the last time you got a duvet or a pillow? It's not just all jumpers, scarves, sports jackets and hats. There's other things that wool can be used for. And we just don't think about it that way. I'm the same. I'll not complain because I work in the industry, but when I see what my average is, I'm always disappointed because I know how much care and time I'm taking for my wool, and what I'm getting back just doesn't cover the cost of shearing, and I know that. But it's about trying to make a more conscious effort to help people think about, it might be all right to, instead of getting my groceries and filling the trolley on one side with all my food and then getting a new outfit on the other, wear it twice and throw it away. What's that doing? How sustainable is that? It's not,
We can sometimes forget how many different products wool can go into. I suppose, look, that maybe leads us into the other hat you wear is your council member, the Irish Grown Wool Council.
Yeah.
Maybe just, and look, some will be familiar with what that is, but maybe for those that aren't, what is it, and maybe what are your aims?
Yeah, well, the objective of the council is to transform Irish grown wool. As we all know, it's underutilised and undervalued as a resource. And the council are trying to add a branded value, or an added product value for farmers in a wider supply chain. So we don't actually on the council, buy wool or do anything like that, but we're a collective of people from across the island, of like-minded people that all have a passion and care about Irish wool, because we want people to recognise it as being a valued product. And the more consumers that think, oh, that's great, I would love to get an Irish something or an Irish wool something, that is the key, because you can go to Carol's and you can go and get your jumpers and you can go, all your tourist spots and buy all your iron sweaters, and they're not made from Irish wool. So that's where it needs to change. We need to have a change in the manufacturing of those things and getting consumers to look at the label. You're not looking at a label as, oh, is that Prada or is it whatever? Turn it over. What's it made from?
And look, you mentioned there, it's right across the sector from the manufacturing of a textile end of it back to the basic producers. Just in terms of that, Jayne, like, you're producing some support material at the moment. It kind of covers a lot of what we talked about, how we can actually go about improving the quality of the wool we're harvesting.
Yeah, and it's really simple steps that you can do at that time. We've produced a couple of videos there. Thanks to yourselves for helping collaborate on that. It's been a massive help and something that I don't think we could have done without your help on that. But yeah, there's one with Dave Harity about best practice at shearing time, and then there's a wee bit from myself about how to present your wool at the time of shearing. And we have a wool presentation guide as well. It's been put together by the council. Again, thankfully, with good support from yourselves. So thank you for that.
Look, it's going to be a longer process in terms of getting it back to maybe where we were a couple of years ago, where you were price-wise when we started. But I suppose if we start making some of these little steps, hopefully it could have an impact on it. Yeah,
and I know I hate using the word apathy, but I get it. I know that a lot of farmers just can't be bothered with it anymore because it's just time consuming and they don't even want to be bothered with it. But we need to get back to thinking about the provenance of our wool and how amazing it is. And, we can't grow this fibre anywhere else in the world apart from here. Our Irish wool is unique to us on this island. And it's getting consumers to think, actually, I want to invest my hard-earned cash on something like that, and I appreciate people are feeding their kids and clothing their families to get their kids to school, and they might not be thinking, how am I going to be sustainable in my home in terms of what I buy, for what I wear, what I walk on, and what I sleep in. But hopefully over time, those thinking patterns will change. And it's like one of our board members, Brenton Kelly, he says, like the boat was going in the wrong direction. We've got to turn really slowly. And now it's just trying to gather that momentum to carry it forward in the right direction. And I just really hope that it does, because there's a lot of people have put a lot of time and effort of their own time into these things, especially, the Irish Growing Wool Council is a voluntary body. We're all meeting in evenings and meeting, when we're in work and doing, on lunch breaks, you're just grabbing a meeting when you can. So I really hope all those efforts can come together as a good collaborative approach to improve things overall for the farmers.
Look, Jayne, really appreciate your time coming on with us. It's great getting some of them insights on what happens on wool. Hopefully, look, we'll get you back at some stage again. We'll see how things are going.
Please, I would love to do like a recap, because I hope all that comes across okay, and I'm happy for any questions. Keep a bank of them for after, and we'll revisit them again. It would be great.
Will do. Jayne, thanks a million for coming on.
No bother.
We leave it there for this week's episode. I'd like to thank Jayne again for giving up her time to come on with us. I have included a link in the show notes to 2 videos Jayne was discussing and preparing for shearing, and top tips on how to harvest wool at shearing time. That's it for me for this episode. For updates for our sheep programme, keep an eye on our Twitter page at Teagasc Sheep. I'm Kieran Lynch. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us wherever you get your podcasts.